Welcome to Which, the Women in Technology Creative Industries Hub, elevating the voices of women in tech. My name is Bishi, the founder of Which. In this podcast, I'll be talking to a woman in tech about her work, journey, life, and process. In this episode, I'll be talking to artist, body architect, founder of Future Beauty, Future Bodies, and mother of the emotional makeup movement, Alex Box. Please do like, review, and subscribe. We're a new podcast, and every bit of support helps. Hello, Alex Box, and welcome to Creative Women in Tech podcast. How are you feeling now that lockdown is starting to lift?
Oh, wow. I feel quite, I feel really joyous today. As I was saying a little bit before, we had a little bit of a pre-chat that I'm part of a Buddhist group, and we had an amazing 2-hour meditation class last night that was working on chanting, but also a body scanning, which is quite funny seeing as I do a lot of body scanning in tech, but they call it body scanning by scanning for your body. And it was just really lovely. I actually fell asleep in a little bit of it. And I just thought, I wouldn't have been on that Zoom Buddhist group if it wasn't for lockdown, if it wasn't for COVID. I wouldn't have probably committed to going in person. But the fact that I did at the first start of lockdown and have carried on every Wednesday since, it's been a real constant and something that's just really, I can't unknow now. So I'm in there now. So it's kind of like it's affected a lot. But I don't know, it's been a funny one because I think the first lockdown, that kind of rush of adrenaline of everybody saying, right, I'm going to go and bake bread and I'm going to learn jujitsu, and because we all don't know what's going on. I think this sort of an almost like sort of naive quest to just reach humans. This is second, third time around. It's almost like people are really fatigued, and I think there's a kind of like the opposite, that massive opening up has kind of made you edit down, but have more quality conversations. So the rise of the sort of Clubhouse, which I do adore, I really, really enjoy it, but it's the sort of quality, people want some of the stimulus taken away. So like Clubhouse is great because you can't see anything and you're just listening. And obviously like podcasts, the same. It's almost like you have to, curate your sensorial overload and like edit down what you need and what you've got energy to do. So at the moment, I'm just coming out of homeschooling and I've got a puppy as well, which was probably the stupidest thing I've ever done in lockdown, but she's amazing. But it's been so much to try and juggle an 8-year-old and a puppy and work and even have time to think creatively. I've felt this time round it's been really, really tough. So I think I'm just peeping over the sort of parapet really to sort of start thinking about what it is that I want to do right this moment.
Yeah. And so is your 8-year-old back at school now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, he is. I mean, that's huge because all you do is, care about the sort of psychological welfare of them. And it's been so tough on them, I mean, he's very self-sufficient. He's an only child. I'm an only child. My partner's an only child. We've got this kind of only child's club. But, and they are very self-sufficient in that way, but they just need human contact. We all do. But there is definitely them going back does create an order that you are used to, that does give a little bit of a hint of sort of not a normality, because I don't really trust or worry too much about normality, but a sense of order that feels familiar, which is obviously soothing, which kind of definitely kicks up some dopamine and sense of kind of returning to something. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I'd like to welcome you as the first non-music based creator to the Which podcast, and your name and your work and career is associated with complete fashion legends, the likes of Vivienne Westwood, Issey Miyake, Alexander McQueen, Gareth Pugh, Nick Knight, and Rankin. And I found a really beautiful quote: "I create characters, personas, and performances on a human canvas." How would you define your practice?
Well, first, let me thank you for inviting me. And I'm sure I follow many people that have great creators, fellow creative women. I mean, my practice, I think, is like a sort of 360 holistic view on emotional narrative, and how that takes shape is driven very much by material, if I'm honest. I mean, I'm inspired by material. I get, it's almost like finding a material, the narrative just falls out of its being, and its placement. And I guess it's sort of cerebral connection with me. I mean, I spend a lot of time in nature, and I moved from London 3 years ago and into the Cotswolds and into sort of quite a wild, untamed nature, actually. Not what, I mean, I was brought up in the countryside, but not like this. I mean, this is kind of wild ponies and you know, routes that have not been trodden, and being in something that's so sort of wild, but also sort of so I guess so sort of giving, and peaceful. It's opened up a lot of connection for me with the space that I didn't realize that I had blocked off in the city. So my creation, like I say, is very much about creating emotional narratives and connection to material, but it living on the body. And I think that kind of, the body as an environment, but also as a tool of connection and storytelling, is something that the way that manifests is through the materials that I either bring to it or it reflects off. So a lot of the time, characters kind of develop from their interaction with material and environmentally. And so I think that's why I work with a lot of, you know, like Wayne McGregor and a lot of contemporary dancers, and musicians understand what I say by visual landscapes. And, you know, it's almost like the body is in an environment, but it also affects and echoes out into that space, and it echoes back. So you're never this kind of one thing in a space. It's like you're working in harmony with the acoustic, with the visual, with the sense and essence, and then the memory of a person and where that lives in your mind. And so there's what I, you know, as a creative around the body and using it, like, you know, I call it body architecture. It's exactly that. It's the environment of the person, but not only the emotional connection and the resonance it has with the, you know, interaction, but also the history, the placement, the essentially the emotional canvas of the body, and what that is, and how that can be translated, and how it can connect with people, and storytelling.
What was the first piece of technology that impacted your creativity?
Photoshop 2.5. Bang. Yeah, because it really did. It was just so funny. I was talking about this the other day. When I was at Chelsea Art College and I was doing a BA, I kind of went in as a painter and I came out as a multidisciplinary artist. And that was a really dirty word back then, because, you know, you had to be a painter or a sculptor, and, you know, you had to be down the old school kind of, you know, Jasper Johns or Michael Craig Martin. And it was funny because Chelsea then was very, very driven by old school painters. But it was on the edge of, you know, inviting so many cool visiting lecturers, and they didn't really know what to do with me. So I got these incredible visiting lecturers. So I had Jake and Dinos Chapman came in, and immediately got what I was trying to do and talk about. And I had, you know, Gladstone Thomas and some amazing people that really said, look, you know what you're doing. It isn't based in painting or sculpture. It's telling a story, and it's in any medium, and just do that and it's fine. So very quickly, that sort of narrative led me to you know, an understanding of the body as narrative led me to Matthew Barney and Cindy Sherman, and two people that definitely had a huge effect on me in the 90s and my early sort of exploration of the body, really, because I thought, yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. That's exactly what I'm not any one thing, but I'm using the body as a you know, as the focus. So I did these pieces, and I wanted to make multiples of myself. And I did this kind of thing of me putting a tent up, and it was like the process of putting a tent up, but I wanted sort of 25 of me. So I kind of just, at the time, my partner was an illustrator, and he was just using scans and using Photoshop. And I got to kind of grips with Photoshop, and it was just, it opened up a whole new world for me. And I immediately realized, like, you know, this is everything. You know, I can just envisage on my own. I don't have to sort of get, you know, all these kind of elements in that were very sort of clunky in a technical way in the college. They only had the foundry and stuff like that. So I need to do. But what was quite interesting is that one of those pieces with the tent was I wanted to put this kind of thing under my skin. It was like an aeroplane 3D thing that I'd made. And so I got a book out the Chelsea Library on prosthetics. So I rang up all these numbers to get this kind of whatever it was, latex and stuff. So I was finding myself going on these journeys like Charles Fox and places that I'd never heard of, to find all these kind of amazing materials to just do what it is that I saw in my head. So I was mixing these mediums and these ancient books of, prosthetics by Rick Baker, who did Thriller, who now I know is a really good friend. And years forward, fast forward, I met him doing a performance, and he was sat in the front row with his arms crossed. It was like slightly intimidating, but he that mixing that with Photoshop 2.5, it was just amazing, because it just gave me the chance to create something that also, if I'm honest, I had to really back up with it being slick, because there was so much critique and sort of skepticism about emerging digital art forms that it was crass, that you almost had to make it so bloody good looking that they couldn't argue with the quality to actually verify it or vilify it or get any kind of any kind of foothold in the art world at that time. So I spent all my money on the first dye sublimation print that was in this printers in Soho, and I was so excited to get this copy, and have to dial it in and take it down there, and so it was a real moment. And I was revisiting that the other day and thinking how fast everything is now, but there was it was a big deal, but it was also it made me think about why I was doing that, but why also it was expected of to have some kind of almost expense to it to stop it from, there was such a doubt about digital and it being so throwaway that it almost had to look and be expensive to be able for people to get their head around it.
Yeah. And what was the first fashion-based project that started turning your attention towards technology?
Let me think. I think, well, early on, one of the first collaborations I had was with a designer that back then had a design label called Suture, and they were doing things with performance artists and dancers, and which was kind of sort of unheard of back then. And they used to be AD, and they used to make Lee Barry's clothes, and one of the two of that partnership, Philip Delamore, is my husband. So we met all the way back then when he was a fashion designer, and he was using micrography slides to make digital print, and that was just like, what, super early printing techniques, but also using digital printing. It was a really big deal. And I was married up to him, as a collaboration, because I was making things on the body as an artist. So a friend of ours who's an artist said, you should collaborate together. So we did an art piece at the Milch Gallery, I seem to remember. And that was my work put in the fashion context, it wasn't before. I was showing, at the Milch Gallery as doing installation art and things like that. So it suddenly became a fashion context. And one of the things that we made was we were talking about when, before 3D printing came out, is there a way that we could make skin? Could we make skin that was bonding people together, but it was a fabric? But was it a skin? Was it a fabric? It was kind of playing with this idea of like flesh hoods at the time. And we sort of like worked on this kind of, digitally printing on latex and making skins that attach people together. And that was probably my first introduction into digital processes and heat pressing, and so just use that textural exploration that really kind of I guess then went into a fashion context. That was much more process based, but I think one of the more obvious applications of what I was doing with digital was I mean, there's a couple of things. Like I made these LED light mouthpieces for Gareth for a show that the models wore under their tongues, that when the show finished at the end and the lights went down, they all came out and they had this kind of grill of light. But this was before, you can buy things like that on Alibaba now. But, back then I literally was, soldering LEDs together and stuff like that. And it was quite basic, but it looked really techy. And I kind of loved that. And I also used one of the only, I made these eyepieces as well for him. A lot of the process that looked like it was quite simple was actually behind the scenes quite difficult and techy. I used laser cutting, at Goldsmiths to cut these black and white eyepieces that we did for his first Paris collection.
Yeah.
Which
year was that? No, sorry. Like which?
Golly. I think it was like 2010. I think. Okay. So there was, but ongoing in that, there was a lot of it was coming out of the research that Philip was doing when he opened my partner, when he opened the first digital graduate course and the digital studio at LCF. They were doing so much research and so much academia around digital research, but not applying it. So it was all academia. So I was kind of grabbing these nuggets of things that were coming through that studio, thinking, God, that could be this, could be that, could be that. So 3D printing, with Gareth, before that laser cutting, now I'm remembering the sort of paper trail, I did 3D scan of my head, and then I made these in very early haptic tool. I was extruding kind of shapes from my face, and then I did a 3D print of that, and then did a vacuum form face mask of that, and then painted it, and then all the models had that for one of his earliest shows, actually. So that predates that now. It's funny when you start remembering, you're like, oh, hang on a minute, there was something before that, So that was really interesting because, just to be able to make using a haptic tool, which I'd never done before, in a almost like a clay sculpture. So it had the resistance, was super exciting, and the haptic pen as well, so we could draw these things in real time and create a mesh work was more exciting sometimes than the output. The exploration was and still is the thing that really is like, whoa, the exciting bit. Sometimes the application slows it down because it's lost, it's lost in the melee. But so there's quite a few things, and actually the more I think about it, I'll probably unearth more that predates that, but those are the things that spring to mind immediately.
Yeah, amazing. And I read that using digital fabrication techniques and simple electronics, you created a range of startling face artworks. I think you began to describe a little bit of that in the work with Gareth Pugh, but could you expand more on these face artworks?
Yes, in pure digital form, or with because I'm wondering if that's referring to some of the light painting that I did, or okay. So with the light painting, that came sort of in tandem with a software package that I made, a software application that I made with Microsoft called Splashbox, which was using the Kinect sensor to read the space frame as digital paint. So what I was just after the ranking book, I formed such a great relationship with Charlie Wright, who was the model, and I loved her face, and we had such a great relationship. I asked if she would let me 3D scan her face, and she was up for that. And back then, 3D scanners the head scanners were quite like instruments of torture, and you'd have to face clamped and stuff. So we scanned her head, and I made this kind of like alabaster sort of almost like a white bust of her head. And then I worked with this great developer who was he was working at the Fashion Digital Studio and went on to be like amazing developer for Microsoft. And I said, look, I really want to be able to throw virtual makeable paint at her face, at the 3D space, but it to move and have the resonance and texture and life force of paint, because I've seen so many programs and it's like, you know, it is what it is, but it doesn't drip or have physics, you know, it doesn't have opacity. I mean, opacity is the holy grail anyway, but it, you know, what can we do? So we worked on this for ages, and at the time of sort of like working on it, I was developing also the idea of performance and building characters, and that kind of married up with Mac offering to support that as a process, and it to be part of a ongoing performance that I would work for, I would do with Mac Cosmetics. So they supported that research, and I made Splashbox, and it kind of like it really was very early. And when I did it in the performance, and some of the performances were very private, and some of them were like there was 1,000 people at. I did it on stage, and people had no idea what I was doing. I mean, we're talking like sort of 2007 or 8, and it kind of just, you know, it was lovely because I did this kind of physical performance, and then I did this at the end, and it was set to sort of night on a bare mountain, and you know, it seemed like really like wow, and I'm, you know, bringing uranium to the crowd, and it just almost, I think in a way, fell flat because no one knew what I was doing. So me waving my arms around, things appearing, but it was too early, and it was you know, it was like, you know, I've had to sort of just explain it recently, and at that time, you know, I was thinking about how can I digitally either project or face map, or I mean, it wasn't called face mapping then, but how can I get a new form or texture using digital onto the face? So that then led me to the idea of projecting Photoshop or Illustrator onto a face, and I thought I've got to find a way of doing this and capturing it. So I started to use that as a way of being able to, in a live performance situation, I got it so it was almost like a projector, but I kind of fine tweaked it so it was just within the stillness of the face, and obviously it had to be, she had to be very still. But I painted to music, responding absolutely integrally. I mean, it's absolutely intrinsically it's to music. Whatever came to me as a doodle, as a sketch, as a form of drawing, and it was projected onto the model, and that was filmed, and the photographs were taken of it as well. So and I combined that with the Splashbox as well. So it was kind of like using the same model. So what I did in the performance is that she was on the stage, and I was doing this, and then she disappeared, and then the 3D version of her came back, and I did it in Splashbox. So it was just to try and push at the boundaries and sort of like understanding their identity, but also the surface and how those can be represented. And I think that is the journey that I'm just always on, is about how can we push at that? How can we re-represent beauty? How can we adopt new ways of telling a story with the face?
Yeah. And wow, I actually slightly lost my place in my questions because I was so taken away by all of that. But are you developing more technological, kind of more like the intersection of kind of like, I guess makeup's a bit of a sort of a basic word in this context, but I guess kind of, you know, like, let's say like human canvassing and kind of electronic and technology? Like, have you thought about doing anything with kind of AI and things like that? Or
oh yeah, absolutely. Very much. So yeah, I mean, that naturally led me into into virtual reality and augmented reality, and yeah, absolutely. So that also being and doing what I do, even though you think you're making it in a vacuum and no one can see it, people do see it, you know. And I started I reconnected with Wayne McGregor, who is absolutely wonderful and very forward thinking, and doing the same with the body in dance. And we started to work with Oculus and the Royal Opera House, and in ongoing sort of projects as well, about how an audience intersects and can it be inside the experience whilst not being inside the experience, and how the body can be represented in augmented reality, but but cerebrally how you can connect, and how, you know, AI and machine learning can kind of be built within that as well, and the emotional body and the emotional metasphere. Absolutely. And I mean, I was talking yesterday with Epic Games about the metaverse and the metahuman, and there's a lot. I mean, but it's also, I'm right in it, you know, and I'm happy to be so. But it's like sometimes keeps me awake, because I can see it. I've been seeing it for ages, you know, and it's like it's been accelerated from COVID for sure. And I think that what's exciting to me is people are open now. Their ears are open to technology. There's a gold rush for sure. I mean, I've literally fried from NFT talk for the last sort of week, because that's so huge for people and so hard to understand, but then not hard to understand. And then it feels like everybody's got fear of missing out on this, you know, ground floor level entry, you know, decentralization of art and music and all things. So there's suddenly like this glut and interest and like hunger for digital, but equally with it's so even though there's a lot of advancements, it's still in its kind of aesthetical infancy. And there's a sort of like a real kind of rush to just let's do digital. And it's like, well, hang on a minute. You know, there's you know, we're trying to build you know, in the race of things being so quick, people are really skimping on what really is taste and digital morality and a standard in a way, you know. And I think that people don't know what good digital and bad digital is yet, and they will. I mean, they'll become more au fait with that. And I don't mean that as a sort of, you know, a hierarchical thing. It's just that you know what, you know, you intrinsically know that something could be better, or it's like of a quality, or of an understanding what how something is made.
Yeah.
I know I veered off track a little bit there, but yeah, no, there's so much of the technology that lends itself to the experience. And I mean, really, as we do move into, you know, metahumans and the metaverse, and I mean by that is everything just being one, you know, the story, the narrative, and the emotional connection to why make it in the first place is going to drive everything. You know, it's not enough for it to just look new. You know, it's not enough for it to just sound new. It's like, well, why would I care when there's everything? You know, and I keep saying it's like a time of so much knowledge, but so much information, so little knowledge, you know. So it's kind of like we have to catch up with what we've created, and be sort of you know, really authentic about what choices you make and how you make them, what stories you're going to tell, you know, and actually as well, like how much you know, political importance, emotional you know, integrity, and yeah, you know, how you tell the stories and who you tell them to, and responsibility.
Absolutely. And on the subject of emotions, what is the emotional makeup movement?
Oh, okay. So that I have been banging on that for so long, because obviously being and doing things on the face, you know, really kind of dragged me into that's quite telling, isn't it? Dragged me into being called a makeup artist, which has never sat well at all. But I understand why people would see that. So, you know, I definitely have done makeup, more conventional makeup, and happy to do so, and enjoyed it very much, and explored all of the kind of ramifications of that. But what I found really interesting within that, like soon as I sort of like was inside that world, is like how the conversation and how the words were never about emotions. They're always about artifice, you know, and motifs and fashion motifs or historical references, or, you know, it was never kind of feeling based. It was always a sort of like like motif based. Like the red lip, the smoky eye, you know, the winged eyeliner, the Betty Davis eyebrow. It was always like referential. It was never sort of like spiritual, emotional, integrated, you know, unless it was about like make a film character. So when I and then it was kind of broken down into again more like reference points. So what I found was when I started to work in shows that were with, say, like particularly, I would say French designers, that I that had a like immense sensitivity to nuance in their work and in their clothes, and absolutely I attracted people that had this whole world of characters in their mind. You know, I worked with Veronique Leroy, who was, you know, she would sit literally say, oh, you know, she is a little boho, so you know, she came out of a car and the wind hit her face, and then she had a lover, the lover was gay, but then she died, and she, you know, she would literally tell me this story about, in her mind, what the character was. And then my assistants would look at me like, how the hell are you going to translate that into a person? But I was on board 100%. I got it. I could see everything she was saying, and it was emotional. It was like an emotional palette. There was nothing in there. Was it like, and I want a red lip, or it's like the 60s, or it's you know, Pierre Cardin or YSL in the 80s. Nothing, not one thing was said. It was like, she's had an orgasm, she's died, she did it. So in a way I was like, well, that is an emotional palette. That is, I'm seeing veins because somebody has been through adrenaline. I'm seeing sweat, you know, so I'm going to get sweat, I'm going to get veins, I'm going to make them look slightly tougher because they've been outside, so there'll be broken veins where the sun hit their nose. And so you're kind of anthropologically building an emotional landscape that is nothing to do with makeup, the way people talk about makeup. So I intrinsically did this. I didn't think anything about it, but until I went to talk about it to backstage, when people were saying, so what foundation did you use?
Yeah.
And I was going, well, I did use this, but it's not really about that. And then I sort of thought, well, this is a great space to educate, instead of sort of being snotty about it, or sort of saying, well, it's not about a 0.2 eyeliner from MAC or something. You know, I said, look, you know, I'm creating a character, I'm creating a feeling and a vibe, and it's not necessarily something you see, but it's something you feel. So it's like, it's an emotional makeup. So I'm going to describe what I'm doing with words that aren't used or normally within the beauty sphere. So I was saying, you know, when I put something on, I tell people to put it on as if they kind of breathed it on with an integrity that is coming from somebody that I loved before. And I asked that of my assistants, and at first that terrifies people, but then they totally get it, because it's, you know, when you listen to music, you don't tell people how to listen to music, do you? I mean, it's like, you take it in, and that's one of the wonderful things about music. You trust, and you feel, and you connect, and you just react, and that's why it's so pure. And I was like, please do that with makeup. So don't necessarily, you know, arrive at that how you want. Don't arrive at it with brushes. If you want to use your hands, fine. There is no technique. It's more about, you know, there is a technique I'm doing, but I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just feeling it. So that's where that whole idea of emotional makeup came from. And then people started to connect with that and understand it. But it was very much, and still is, an important piece of work to be done around how people talk about beauty and makeup, because it's still based in a language that almost is devoid of emotion.
Absolutely. And I heard another podcast, and you were saying some really interesting things about the evolution of social media and how we've all ended up with the same face, that kind of reality TV face.
Yeah.
And it was a really fascinating, the stages that you built up from, you know, the digital camera phone to then the selfie mode to the face, and then the body, and then the whole dysmorphic universe that we're sort of living in now. Could you talk us through that again? I mean, do you think that it's like, I mean, we all love social media and hate it for different reasons, but do you think that do you think it's been more of a positive thing for people to express themselves visually, or?
I think it's a mixed bag, actually. I think it's enabled people to explore. And I think, like any early adopter of new things, it starts out really good. You know, it starts out with the intentions of pure experimentation. You know, like Instagram, I started at the beginning with Instagram, and it was so organic and easy to find people. And, you know, you'd put a hashtag in and you'd find exactly your tribe and interesting things.
Yeah.
Now it's curated and orchestrated and manipulated into seeing just more of the same, if not exactly what you don't want to see, unless you make a fake account and, you know, trick the algorithm. But yeah, I think that early on, you know, obviously makeup was never it always had a place in trend and accessory, but it was never the trend, the accessory. And then when the phone suddenly had the selfie option, the face became the commodity, the face became the advertising space, the centric space for selling, because, you know, more makeup in that space, more makeup on the face sells more product. And because the selfie mode and the, you know, the desire for and the rise of Instagram and the influencer, you know, now you have a much more capacity for body, because you've got a depth of field and different camera angles and different sensors. But the first wave of smartphones, the selfie was the centric and most involved way of showing yourself. So because of that, makeup became, you know, took center stage. And then the makeup blogger and the influencer became more so. But what happened was that kind of massive wave and spike inspired people to try it on themselves and become their own sort of influencer, and the how-tos and the YouTube vlogs and things became a real viable way to become, you know, to basically have a boutique sort of market. But because of the rise of that, the rise of being told how to do it became almost way more followed and believed than the exploration that came from yourself. So it was suddenly like a deluge of being told how to be individual, how to individually create. Well, it's the same as Pinterest, the same as everything. You know, this is a massive, humongous kind of surge of examples, which you would think would inspire, but actually, if anything, it can close people down, because they're relentlessly seeing things that they haven't done yet that may inspire, but also closes them down. Think, well, I can't do it that well, or it's already been done. Why would I do it? So and also it's not an infinite amount, because once people are all receiving the same sort of influence from Pinterest or Instagram, or the algorithms give them that, they just repeat the same things that they've seen. And because obviously the nature of people want to like and follow, they fell into the traps of things that are popular and things that get likes. And then you get an endless sea of pulled back eyebrows and a winged eyeliner and a cut crease. And before you know it, that's it. And people daren't show the creative things that they're creating at home in the bedroom, because it won't get liked or it won't get followed. And it kind of killed it. I think Instagram killed. I mean, that's why I made the Makeup is Dead, Long Live Makeup t-shirt, because I felt that makeup as I've known it so far, and that kind of burgeoning exploration and excitement and explosion of, you know, things like Illamasqua and you know, people beginning to sort of express themselves, was suddenly closed down by the idea of actually there's a new motif and there's a new way of earning money, and there's a new way of garnering followers engagement by doing actually something that's very staid and is the same as what everybody else is doing. But then on top of that validation is that all of a sudden makeup, you could transform yourself into this kind of beauty kit, you know, a tick. You know, you could do the shading, do this, lashes, this, that, lip, that, and all of a sudden, you know, you got this validation that was a beautiful, like getting a handbag or a pair of shoes of the moment. That was the beauty face of the moment, and that was accepted, and in a way that was verified as beautiful. But really, it's a kind of a motif. For the first time, it was a fashion accessory. There's a look that became a fashion accessory. So that was adopted and obviously jumped on by all the companies that just want to sell more products. So in a way, you know, there was contouring, then there was highlighting, then there was spotlighting, and then there was, you know, glow on top of that. And it was just more product, because obviously you can shift loads of units. And why wouldn't you, if you're a company, you want to kind of endorse those things? So it got really hijacked, and the individualness, the sort of like exploration of the self and the kind of panoply of things that you could be, was really dialed down. And I think that's yeah, to the detriment of self-exploration and identity, for sure.
Yeah, I love Instagram, but the whole influencer market, it's I find it all so confusing. Like I mentor a lot of younger musicians and producers and artists, and I think there's a lot of anxiety because people aren't going out to clubs, or I don't know, like, Soho and East London. I try and describe to people, even people who are like 28 or 29, there's like not that much younger than me, but trying to explain to them that every night of the week there would be 4 or 5 different clubs, and you'd go and you dress up, and there was no Uber, so you would risk it going on the night bus there and back, the whole ceremony of getting dressed up and going out, and that's where we would have seen each other, and just being in awe of each other and thinking, oh my God. And yeah, there was a select amount of publications, and it was always very heartbreaking if you didn't quite get included into those publications. But then you would create zines, and like people just create their own mad culture, and they're still creating their own culture now. But there's something about being in the space and just sweating it out on a dance floor. And I feel like the selfie mode and this like accessorized like makeup face, which has also been hijacked by, the Botox and filler industry, this identikit face. I think it's just out of people looking at themselves too much and not just being in the world, and not just being messy and being together and being joyful. It's hard enough, it's hard enough when you're in your late teens and your 20s, when most people are just utterly adorable to look at. The majority of people, you just look adorable, but you're taught to hate yourself because of the pressure that society puts onto you. And if you're constantly in selfie mode, or if you're constantly doing FaceTimes and stuff, like I think the pressure has become really, really immense on young people. But on the subject of the body as a sort of a holistic canvas, there are these really beautiful performances of you creating makeup looks, but almost as a piece of holistic performance on YouTube. Could you talk a little bit about them? Because they're beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that really sprang out of me doing the Mac performance and seeing that, I was asked to do a masterclass, and I said, I have no idea how to do a masterclass, and I really don't. I'm just not that kind of artist. And I said, but I can create in my mind something that people may be inspired to engage into. It's not a technique based thing, but it's a happening. So I was really kind of inspired to create characters over the top of each other from what I was calling the evolution of surface, but it was from life. It was like from amniotic life state to death, as far as I could see it. And it was very much, it's something that I address a lot in my work is well, as we all do, birth and death, and everything in between life. But I wanted to be able to, take people completely on that journey and be very fallible and very in the moment of creation, which most people aren't. I mean, nobody's sat in, no, not nobody's sat in the room with someone creating an album or a design collection or any creation. It's usually, a lot of the time, it's quite private, or it's very select, or it's very it moves in stages. It's over a space of time. It's not in an hour. It's not in an hour and a half. So unless you go into performance art, so I sort of I really wanted to bring all of the sort of things that move me and why I do what I do, and then also start to try and understand what it is that I am as a creative when I put myself in a public realm, because I am very much connected to and feel very strong healing things. I always have. I feel very extrasensory things. I overfeel. I get moved immensely, and I kind of thought, well, this is something that I need to share. I feel very strongly that when I'm on stage, something happens that is from somewhere else that I really want to connect with, and I want to understand that further. So I work very much with like a music. I started very much off with the idea of this birth to death and exploration of surface, and that is completely and utterly guided by music. So I sort of made, I knew that in an hour I wanted to create, you know, essentially 3 to 4 characters that went from the model being like no hair, no, you know, nothing on the head, no eyebrow hair, you know, completely neutral palette, and just having this kind of graphic equalizer of every kind of material, and, you know, being open to the moment, knowing that I'm going to do this kind of very pale and amniotic, almost nude alien-esque surface first, that then would go into color, that then would go into you know, this kind of intense kind of blackness. So I didn't, you know, it's not premeditated, but I wanted to be open to whatever would happen in that moment as well. So to guide me, I picked the music, you know, so I made like, you know, a playlist of music that would completely sonically move me and I would respond to, and it had to be of the same texture, absolutely, of the character. So obviously I started very much in sort of Brian Eno and, you know, all this beautiful music from Solaris, and just real kind of ethereal, high Sigur Rós kind of like emotionally opening spaces that moved then into like psychedelia, and then moved very much into sort of music that was much more like the backwards priest. And I used this gosh, I'm trying to remember what I use now, but a lot of kind of discordant chants and Demanda Gallus, and, you know, things that were really like things that I knew that, especially because I was doing this globally. So I went to, you know, I was in the States with it, I went to India, I went to Russia, and I knew that some of these musics and sounds were really going to be things that other people hadn't heard, and would also, you know, provoke probably, but I was globally sensitive. There were certain things I didn't use in India or Russia and things, but the music was really, really important. So, and also along with the music, the whole dressing of the models was, I made all the pieces of the body as well, so, and hair. So it was creating, like literally creating a person and evolving that persona on stage. And I really picked the models very carefully and how they engage with the audience. And I also create smells, scents that were sent out over the crowd with each character too. So really, and then that was it. It was like, then let's go. And it was, I don't think that prepared for how epic it turned into and how much it transformed me, because it really did. I mean, it makes me shiver now, and I have to be careful when I do it, because I realize how much the expenditure of performance, I feel like I'm a husk afterwards. I'm sure you can relate to that.
Oh yeah.
But it was very inclusive, and the audience were right there with me. And because a lot of people said, I've never seen a human face like go through all these incarnations, but also how I responded to, I didn't know where it was going next, so I was sort of frightened almost. And then I was like, you know, it reminded me of something, so that started making me think of something. And then I really, you know, people were crying because the music reminded them of something, but then they were looking at something that reminded them of something else. So there was this kind of like synesthesia or memory trip. And so I got like the most incredible response from it. Plus, like when I went to the States, I knew, I mean, I knew that everything is so very like right there. Everyone wants to be right. So things fell off, and I could hear people, you know, I could try and stick like some prosthetic on and it fell off. So like I just got some tape and taped it on, and then it went with like, and people just like, oh my God, it like, it fell off, and it's like, it didn't stick for Alex Box. And like, I said, exactly that. I said, and you put tape on, and you were like, fucking hell, you know, you stick tape on it, and it just went a different way, and you went with it. And I said, well, that's the performance. The fallibility of creation isn't that it's just like perfect, you know, things happen and you go with it and you go somewhere else, and that's okay. And I realized really, really quick that so much of what it was not what I was doing, but was what it stood for. and like you say, like the accidents, things falling over. I worked with dancers that fell over, music that didn't work, and then I just started like clapping instead of music, and it was it that I realized so much that was it. That was the message, was the freedom to create in front of other people, but the actual, you know, fallibility of humans in front of other humans is so what's needed. And especially in the creative sphere, that everything just pops out like perfect, and it just isn't. You know, it's really sweaty, and it really has organic like chaos that you just go along with. And a lot of people don't see that because they just see the end product, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Well, to finish off this podcast, like, I mean, I could talk to you for hours, and just on a really personal note, I hope we do just keep more in touch.
Yeah, please.
I've been, you know, just like fascinated and just so blown away by the work that you've been involved in. And I was looking at some things being like, I'm going to say it out loud. Oh God, I'd love to collaborate with her on something. I don't know what it is. I just want to put it out in the ether. But to finish this podcast, I'm going to ask you, who is your favorite woman in tech?
Oh,
they can be from any discipline, which I know makes it even more confusing.
Oh my goodness, that's putting me right on the spot. Oh, who's my favorite woman in tech? Oh God, I'm thinking of entrepreneurs, I'm thinking of designers. Oh, that's really mean. I mean, it's really funny because when you said tech, for some reason my mind just went straight, which isn't tech at all, but I went straight to Louise Bourgeois, because I always feel like, even though she's not tech, there's this kind of like multidisciplinary understanding of surface that I feel is technological. You know, it's like it's boundary breaking. I mean, it's not tech, but I mean, obviously, you know, there's been amazing people. You know, obviously Iris Van Herpen's been incredible, and she's opened loads of doors for people, and obviously there's Bjork and all these people. But I sort of feel like, you know, some of the people that I've seen that are emerging that I don't necessarily, I would love to be able to give a platform for, because they're not known yet, that are doing things like, you know, at the Royal College of Art, there's so many, there's a you know, really great, and I don't want to get their name wrong, so I might be able to give you this, you might put it in.
Yeah.
But great sort of people working with identity, non-binary artists that are just exploring identity from themselves, but also through digital medium and using technology and doing entirely digital collections. But I tell you what, actually, now saying that, she's not in tech, but she facilitates tech, and that's Zoe Broach, that runs the Royal College of Art.
Oh, I love her. Yeah. I love Zoe so much.
So do I, and I think she is like the aggregator and galvanizer and supporter of tech. So, and tech in every organic, every, you know, in the purest form. And I love her. And I think that I would have to say her, because I think that she's such an advocate of technology in an area that needs it, but also, you know, she's just as a supporter. So she's like, you know, she is burgeoning the careers of so many people to cross-pollinate and use tech and support it, but also just honor it as an art form, but also as, you know, to create that humanware course where, you know, even just doing away with the idea of it being women's and men's wear and it being human wear, it's like, you know, you need people like that in the world to just you know, basically give the tools to other people to be great, and she does that. So I'm gonna have to say Zoe Broach.
Absolutely. And she's also, I mean, I'm quite envious of her students. I wish I'd had a Zoe Broach when I was at art college, because she just picks everything up, everything from, like, I remember going to the Boudica studio, and everything from the scent of the Boudica studio to how they eat, to how they deal with food, to how they deal with clothes as sculpture. I mean, she's just this, she's this sort of like sensorious magnet of all the stuff. And she's also really wild and wicked fun. I mean, you know, I've sat next to her at a few fashion dinners, you know, you can always tell Zoe the most shocking, the most filthy story, and she'll love it, you know.
Yeah.
And yeah,
I mean, she's a punk. That's what I love about her. And I think, you know, that's the thing, is that energy is just so, you know, it just regenerates, you know, and I think, you know, I hope that we're all like that, you know, that we regenerate and support other people. And that's the thing, she nurtures people, and it's like a massive sort of nurturing and, you know, instinct in her to kind of just, yeah, you know, support and generate and lift up people. And I think that is, in, you know, God, it's super admirable and infectious and beautiful, and also very, you know, how many people have we heard that just have squashed people for so long, especially women, you know, and anybody that identifies as a woman, you know, it's just this sort of understanding that is about connection and lifting up other people. So she's brilliant for that. And you know, if you don't know her, you know, research her or look at what's happening at the RCA. And yeah, it's amazing. She's amazing.
Well, Alex Box, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. It's been wonderful.
Thank you so much, Alex. I can't wait to see how everything develops for you. And thank you all for tuning in and subscribing. Thanks to The Rattle for all of their technical support on this podcast. You can find out more about Witch at Instagram, Facebook and twitter.com/witch. You can go to witch.com to find out news and updates and to sign up to our monthly newsletter. Until next time, thanks